so much for joining us today. Q4 is looming, as everybody knows, and we all know what that means. For many of you, open enrollment is right around the corner. We're going to talk about how to navigate open enrollment through successful preparation and using what UltiPro offers to you. As you guys all know, open enrollment is a major event in the life of your employees and your HR team. Executing open enrollment successfully is a complex process, and it has a lot of moving parts. Mosaic has walked many clients through the open enrollment process. Today, we're going to share with you some best practices and lessons learned through our work with our clients, as well as how to make the most of the tools in UltiPro. Our goal is to set you guys up for a seamless and painless open enrollment session. Before we get started, I want to go over some housekeeping notes for most of our webinars. First, the most common question we get, will I get a copy of the presentation? Yes, you will. We will send that out at the end with a link to our blog on the same topic. So keep an eye peeled for that. That will pop up in the chat box at the bottom of the screen. You will also get an email with that information. How to ask a question. We will include time for your Q&A at the end, but you can always ask us to stop along the way. You can simply ask me to pause, placing your question in the chat box, and I will ask it on your behalf. So either way that works for you, we want to accommodate you. Our presenter today is Amanda Edmiston. She's a senior premier support consultant and a veteran Mosaic team member with over 15 years of progressive payroll experience, as well as HRIS design, testing, and implementation. She's a tenured subject matter expert in this area, as well as core HR and payroll, open enrollment, and life events. Amanda has worked with companies of all sizes and unique requirements, and she really has a thorough understanding of those must-have aspects of a successful open enrollment. So, our agenda today, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the key pieces of a successful open enrollment session, which includes the right people to have on your team and when to involve them, advanced planning and scheduling, the tools from Ultimate and how to use them, your checklist for a smooth open enrollment, and reports, proper configuration, data management, and testing. And now I will turn it over to Amanda.
All right, thank you, Laura. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning or afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Laura said, open enrollment is right around the corner, and we want to help you have a successful and stress-free process. I'm the Senior Premier Support Consultant at Mosaic. I've been with Mosaic for 4.5 years, and I've been heavily involved in open enrollment since my first year. A couple of items to note for today's webinar. This will be a overview of open enrollment. We can address any other questions you have individually if you have any specific questions related to your company. Also, this webinar focuses on core open enrollment functionality. So if you are using Benefits Prime, much of this may not apply to your organization. Ultimate will have a Benefits Prime webinar, so you can reach out to your relationship manager or for their recorded webinar on the Learning Center. The agenda that Laura reviewed will cover some items that are applicable for Benefits Prime enrollment, so please feel free to stay if you'd like. Laura? Laura? Sorry, everyone. I don't know if we lost Laura, but
nope, I'm here.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I'm here. So let's get started and talk about the team, Amanda.
Okay. There are 4 key roles that you need in open enrollment team. The first is an administrator who will configure the business rules and the session or sessions if you need multiple. You'll need a benefits administrator to confirm your benefit start and stop dates. And you'll need a payroll administrator to confirm the dates for the current and upcoming enrollment years. This doesn't necessarily have to be 3 separate individuals. For instance, your benefit administrator might also be your system administrator. So you want to consider the roles your team play and have these 3 roles on the team during the initial configuration and during testing. And testers is the role you want to have on the project team. Your testers will test the sessions from the employee's point of view and identify any potential errors or confusion.
Amanda, do you have an example of a time when somebody didn't think about their team, and tell us a little bit about the effect of that on the whole planning process?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, at my last company, before this administrator was the sole person on the open enrollment team, and he looked at the pay calendar incorrectly and used the wrong pay dates. So this caused the new benefits to take effect on the wrong check date. So the files were incorrect to the vendors, and a lot of manual corrections had to be performed by the payroll. They had some rate changes for some of the plans for the new year, so the incorrect amounts were withheld from the checks, and some employees who had stopped their were still present on the vendor files. So had the payroll administrator been involved from the start, it's likely that the use of the incorrect would have been caught immediately.
Got it. Thanks, Amanda. This is really good information on the right folks to have and the time to get them involved. Let's move on and talk about Ultimate's Toolkit.
All right, so the Ultimate Toolkit is designed to be started up to 6 months before open enrollment live sessions, which has most likely passed for most of you. But it does contain a lot of great information that can and should be started today by the project team. The toolkit contains guided tours, quick cast, checklists, and a lot of reports that are vital for open enrollment. So I definitely recommend getting your project team to review the toolkit as soon as possible. It will also walk you through required and optional post-open enrollment activities. So for today, I pulled 2 items from the toolkit for us to briefly cover. There are many, many more that your project team should absolutely review together. The open enrollment checklist, I use this every year for every open enrollment that I help my clients with. This will guide you through the entire process for open enrollment from planning to open enrollment. It contains 7 phases. Phase 1 is planning, which is identifying who will be on your project team, method export requirements, if you need any new deduction plans, and it will review reports, and then you'll plan your communications to all of your stakeholders, including your employees. Phase 2 is analysis and configuration. We'll cover some of these topics in more detail in a bit. During phase 2, you're going to identify your exact session open and close date phase. You'll identify key dates such as the pending effective date, review and configure any business rules and all messages on those business rules, and you'll identify a timeline and process to send your files to the carriers or vendors. Phase 3 is more configuration and testing. During this phase, you'll refer back to your pending effective date worksheet, which we'll cover later, for all applicable that you'll need in your sessions. You'll determine how to handle any updates to benefits and coverage for new hires or any other changes of employment status outside of the session window. And you'll ensure your benefits administrators have access to open enrollment, and then you'll configure and test all sessions in UltiPro. Phase 4 is final preparation, so a final review of dates, rates, and any vendor feeds that you may have. Phase 5 is Go Live, where you will reset your test selections, you'll set security, turn on any business processes that employees need to make sure that they have access to open enrollment. Phase 6 is monitoring. You'll run reports to verify employee elections, and you can monitor the election status dashboard during this phase as well. Phase 7 is post-open enrollment, where you will run utilities and reports. And again, the checklist goes through all of those phases in great detail, so it's a very useful tool. The second item I pulled to cover today is plan contingencies, which enable you to control benefits eligibility and selection in UltiPro Open Enrollment. You can link benefit plans that are offered in enrollment, which allows employees only to select plans with which they are eligible. So in other words, employees will be required to enroll in one plan before they can enroll in another. The most common contingent plan scenarios are high deductible health plans with an associated health savings account and employee supplemental life with associated dependent life plans. So for an example, if you configure a high deductible medical plan as the parent and a health savings account as the child plan, what that means when they enroll is that employees must enroll in the high deductible plan in order to enroll in the health savings account. And they will get an error if they select a medical plan that's not linked to the health savings account. Contingencies won't be respected if the employee elects a passive enrollment. We'll also cover that later. And when you link plans, you can link one parent plan with or more child plans. So it's a pretty cool feature in UltiPro.
Thanks, Amanda. This is really good detail. If nobody has any questions, let's move on to reporting.
All right, thank you, Laura. There are many standard reports in the web and delivered reports in Business Intelligence that are useful to assist you before, during, and after open enrollment. Some of the standard reports I grabbed for today include employee enrollment status. This report allows you to see each employee's current status, so you can review completed enrollments and make sure that everything looks correct. And then you can review any incomplete enrollments and communicate to employees that they have a certain number of days left to complete their enrollments. Dependents beyond qualifying age. This shows specific information about your dependents, including their age. So if they are too old to be attached to an employee's benefits, then this report will help you identify that. One thing on this report, the age column is based on the dependent's age as of the session effective date. So keep that in mind if you're looking at employee records at the same time you're looking at this report. Employees with benefit group changes. So this report will show you any active employees who had a benefit group change after they completed their elections in their previous benefit group. This report is really useful. I definitely recommend looking at this report as often as you can. Many times your deductions are set up with specific benefits. So if somebody does change a benefit group, this will help you identify if their enrollments need to be updated as well. COBRA drop dependents report includes any dependents that were dropped due to elections made in the open enrollment session. And the age column data on this report is also based on the dependent's age as of the session effective date. Summary of elections is something I use with my clients quite often. This includes all elections, that have been submitted. And this should be monitored closely during the session window to ensure that all of your employees are correct. The last standard report to mention today is employees with pending of insurability. This report provides a list of employees requesting benefits that are greater than your guaranteed issue amount that you have set up on your deduction plans. So you can provide any employees necessary forms from the vendors to get their requested amount approved or declined. For any custom BI or Cognos open enrollments reports that you have, you'll definitely want to review all of your reports from last year and make sure that your data is correct for your internal team and for your vendors. Also, for first-time UltiPro open enrollment configurations, I recommend running reports for date validation, specifically for missing or invalid employee benefit data. Date discrepancies on your benefit plans on the employee level can cause errors in open enrollment and will prevent employees from being able to complete their enrollment sessions.
Thanks, Amanda. This is good stuff. You mentioned this, I think, a little bit above when you said the employee would not be able to complete their session, but what are some other reasons folks should run these reports before open enrollment?
It's important to be proactive, specifically with your custom reports and your vendor file feeds. Just as an example, years ago I had a client who waited until the day before they their custom dental report was due to the vendor. It was a custom report that we had built in BI. And their vendor had completely redefined their specifications. So we had about 6 hours, I think, overnight to update and validate the entire report. We basically rewrote the report. So for any of you who are familiar with Cognos, you know that most of these reports are definitely not an overnight fix and need quite a bit of validation. You know, there's no easy button when it comes to Cognos. I wish there was, but especially when it comes to benefits. For it ahead of the due date, we probably would have been able to update it in advance and avoid the overnight crunch that we were faced with.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. I'll pause here for a minute. Does anyone else besides me have any questions before we move on to configuration? It looks like we're good, Amanda, so let's move on.
So configuration part of open enrollment. Before you begin configuring your session or sessions, if you need multiple, it's important to review and update all business rules that affect open enrollment. These include your deduction benefit groups. Your deduction groups identify specific deduction plans which your employees are eligible for. Deduction benefit types identify, you can set your deduction types to be available in open enrollment or not. And this also allows you to apply messaging in your session. So when they log in, at the top of every screen for each deduction type, they'll see a message that's specified on the type. One item to note for this business rule is the flag called Allow Multiple Deductions. If that flag is changed after the session is configured, it will affect how your employees are able to enroll or decline plans specifically. So a plan type to a type that does not allow multiple deductions, medical, for example, is a good one. The employee will be able to see all the medical plans they're eligible for on one page with the applicable messaging. And they can decline medical altogether, or they can enroll in one plan or the other. If that flag is changed to allow multiple deductions after your session is configured, every medical plan will show on a separate page, and the employee will have to click each page and either decline or enroll. So that flag should never be changed after you configure your open enrollment session. So that's why it's important to review ahead of time. Deduction benefit plans. Again, you want to ensure that any new plans that you need are configured to be added to the sessions. And you want to make sure that your rate changes from the vendors, if you have any, are configured with the correct effective dating. So the date for any rate changes should be the same as your pending effective date, which we'll cover next. And then on your deduction benefit plans, you can also set up enrollment messages, which will show next to each plan if you have anything specific to each plan. Benefit options. Any plans that you have that use the option rate schedule use a benefit option such as employee only, employee plus spouse, or family. So you want to make sure that all of those are configured properly prior to configuration. And lastly, relationships. So those are tied to enrollment as specified on each plan. So an example is that an employee must have a beneficiary assigned as a spouse or a child to enroll in employee life plans. One of the most important items for open enrollment is the pending effective date estimator. I stress this a lot during my open enrollment sessions. I think my clients kind of get tired of saying pending effective date estimator, but this is an Excel spreadsheet that can be downloaded from the Learning Center or from the rollout materials, which you'll get the link in this slideshow. The pending effective date is critical for open enrollment. It is used for effective dating rates, like I mentioned earlier, and it's also the date employees will be able to view their new elections in UltiPro. So this date, due to the nature of the date and exactly how much it affects, once the pending effective date is configured in open enrollment, any changes to that date will erase the contents of the session, which of course means that the entire session will need to be reconfigured. So making sure you follow the recommended range for the pending effective date, which will be noted on the estimator. I just have a little snippet of it on the webinar, but there's multiple tabs on the estimator that you'll need to look at. So you want to look at the detailed results tab and make sure you see all green cells on that tab. So deductions will start and stop at the right time. If any cell turns red, it's an indication that a common effective date cannot be used for all of your deduction groups that you have on file. So if anything turns red, what I recommend is just starting with a blank copy, download a second copy, and separate your pay groups until all cells are green. So I always tell my clients to think traffic light when using the pending effective date estimator, meaning red means stop and green means go. If you do have a benefit plan year that's January through December, excuse me, we recommend using 0101 of the year as the pending effective date. This is for a few reasons, particularly if you have HSA or FSA plans that use the year in the tax category, which is the correct tax category. You can't show any new maximum limits if there are any in the open enrollment session if your pending effective date is prior to the first of the new year. The second one that comes up a lot is that the confirmation page, when the employee gets to that page, it will show the new plans effective as of the pending effective date of the session. So dates other than 1/1 can tend to confuse employees. And the third reason we recommend using 1/1 is that if the employee's lowest cost is changing, an effective dated record of 1/1 is needed for ACA purposes. So pending effective date estimator, very, very important date to be used. Laura, is there any questions before I move on?
Amanda, I think you're good. I think we can keep on going.
All right, there's been some really, really great release to open enrollment with the spring release that Ultimate applied this year. We'll go through 3 of them, I think, today. On the option to copy open enrollment sessions, my clients and many others, according to my contact at Ultimate, have been asking for this functionality for years. So this is a huge and very, very great system change. If your upcoming sessions will be the same or close to the same as your previous year, you can copy the previous year's session. And once you do that, you'll see a new session appear in the list. You can select to that session to open it. You may see some errors or warnings, that's to be expected, and then those can be addressed and corrected. I have recently learned from Ultimate that copies work if you do have plan contingencies. So if you're trying to copy a session from a previous year and it doesn't work, you may have to disable your plan contingencies, copy your session, and enable your contingencies again.
Hey, Amanda, may I interrupt you for a minute? We just had a good question come in, and before we get too far away from it, I want to make sure we share this with the group. One of our folks has asked that they have a few benefits plans that are currently set up, as you just mentioned, at a few different pages. And they're asking for this year, is it easy for them to combine them into one page? And if so, can they do that once they copy from last year's sessions to this year and modify that piece? Okay, so the flag that I was talking about, the allow multiple deductions flag, that will determine how the benefits are in open enrollment. So if you have I don't know if employee life is a good example, I'm sorry, but if you have a certain benefit type that doesn't allow multiple deductions, unfortunately, that is the indicator of unfortunately, there's no way around that. They will show on different pages. If you will not be able to in multiple
Amanda?
plans of that type.
Hi, Amanda. This is Ceci.
Hi.
Hi. So the audio is being a little fuzzy. So I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind jumping onto your computer audio. If our attendees can just stick with us for a sec, it might be better this time, if you don't mind, Amanda.
Okay, I'll do that right now.
Cool. So if everyone can just give us a sec, and we'll back up just a few minutes and make sure that we answer that question and keep talking about configuration.
Okay, I'm back on the computer audio. Is this any better, Ceci?
It sounds really good. Thanks, Amanda. I think
Okay,
it started cutting. Oh, there's a little bit of an echo, but it started cutting right when we started talking about this slide and the whole answer for this question.
Okay, so I'm sorry, so just start with the answer to the question that Laura just asked?
Yeah, let's back up to that.
Okay. So what I was saying is that the way that the plans show in UltiPro Open Enrollment depend on the flag that's called Allow Multiple Deductions on each benefit type. So unfortunately, if you do have any types that do allow multiple deductions, they will show on individual pages in Open Enrollment. So if you change that to try to force them onto one page, the employee will not have the option to enroll in more than one. Am I still sounding okay?
You sound great.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I'm just reading the question again. So yeah, to combine it into one page, you have to change that flag, which doesn't work for all deduction and benefit types.
Sounds good. Amanda, since we were a little fuzzy when we started talking about configuration, do you mind starting at the beginning of the business rules?
So going back to the business rules?
Yeah, let's do that just to make sure folks get all the information. It got a little bit grouchy there at the beginning.
Oh, okay. So the business rules that you need to review before you configure deduction benefit groups that have the specific plans tied to them. So it'll tell you which deduction plans an employee is eligible for based on the group that they're assigned to. Your deduction benefit types, that's what we were just reviewing, that you can set each type to either be available for open enrollment or not. And you can set up messaging for each deduction type, which will show at the top of the page for your deduction type. And so that's what I was saying, the allow multiple deductions flag is critical on here. So if the flag is changed after this session, it will affect how your employees are able to enroll and specifically how they're able to decline plans. So I use medical for instance. Usually medical does not allow multiple deductions. So this kind of goes back to the question that somebody asked, that if you change that flag, all the medical plans will show on a separate page as opposed to showing on a single page in open enrollment. And your employees will have to decline or enroll one per page instead of on a single page for those types of, for those deduction types. Deduction plans, you want to ensure that you have, if you have any new plans that need to be configured, that those are done before you're configuring your open enrollment sessions. And the rate changes from the vendors, if you have any, those need to be configured with the effective date that's the same as the session pending effective date. Excuse me.
Hey, Amanda.
Yes.
Before you move on, we have another question.
Okay.
One of our folks said their first paycheck date is 1/3 of 2020, and their pay period is 12/15/2019 through 12/28/2019, and they want that first 1/3/2020 paycheck to begin deduction with their 2020 benefits. So his question is, can they still use 1/1/2020 as a pending effective date?
It's really hard to say without using the pending effective date estimator, but if you type in your if you download that file and type in all of those dates, it'll ask you for the last payroll of your current year, your benefit and deduction start and stop dates, and it will ask you for your, it'll ask you for your payroll deduction start and stop dates. And then on the detailed tab, it'll give you an actual range that you can use. So it'll tell you your minimum effective date is, I'm just going to throw out December 24th, and your maximum is January 2nd, whatever those dates happen to be. So the estimator file will tell you all of those, all of the possible dates that you can use.
Great. And we've got another one while we're on this subject, Amanda. What happens if you had mistakes on last year's sessions, in this case, deduction issues that were later fixed? What she's asking is, will changes to the plans after open enrollment be reflected when you copy the session?
Anything you copy is specific to the open enrollment session itself. So the messages that are on the deduction plans and the deduction types, those won't necessarily copy. If anything on those specific business rules has been changed, those changes will apply to the copied session. It's basically just grabbing a snapshot of what you had in your previous year, including the messaging that you can put in the open enrollment session itself. It's taking that snapshot and loading it, but anything specific to those business rules that's been updated will be brought over during the copy.
Great, thank you. And I think we can keep moving.
Okay, so the next business rule that I was trying to talk about is benefit options. So any plans using the option rate schedule, such as medical again, they have related options such as employee only, employee plus spouse, family. A lot of clients do list those differently, so you want to make sure that all of those are configured. And then relationships also, which are specified on each plan. So for an example, employee life plans, employee must have a beneficiary assigned as a spouse or child to be able to enroll in life plans. Laura, do I need to cover the pending effective date again as well?
I don't think so. I just wanted to make sure, because our audio was a little blippy, that we jumped back sufficiently. But if nobody else has questions, I think we can keep moving forward. I think we're good.
Okay. So again, the ability to copy the open enrollment sessions it's been something that's been asked for years. So a lot of clients are really, really happy to see it. And again, if you do see any errors or warnings when you copy your session, it's kind of expected. So you can definitely address those once the session has been copied. There's a couple of benefits to copying a session. The first is that it eliminates the need for the system administrator to spend so much time setting up and configuring the session. And it also reduces data entry errors during the configuration of messages on the session. And again, those are messages on the session itself, not on the deduction types or the deduction plans. Those are all separate. One quick side note that I learned last week from Ultimate is that the copy feature only applies to open enrollment. It does not apply to life events yet. Ultimate has that on their roadmap for life events, but they don't have a timeline yet as of last week. The second enhancement that's pretty cool is the deduction benefits groups page. This allows administrators to apply mass changes to dates if they need to, and they can change start and stop dates for multiple groups from this page, as opposed to previously where we had to select every deduction group individually and update the dates there. We now also have the ability to delete open enrollment sessions as long as they are in an incomplete status. This is also new with the spring release. If you have a session that was created in error or coded incorrectly, or for any reason just no longer needed after configuration, you can now delete that session instead of leaving it there for all time. It's pretty cool. There are two types of open enrollment I wanted to discuss today, and that is active and passive. Mosaic recommends active enrollment as this requires your eligible employees to re-elect their benefits, even if there aren't any plan changes for the year. We do understand that not all clients are created equally. Some of my clients actually choose to do a passive just because it works better for them. One client rarely has changes to their benefit plans, so their population of employees do not change their enrollments from one year to the next. So they choose passive every year. It just works better for them, like I said. It's not one size fits all, so definitely consider your specific employee population when you're considering active versus passive. One item to note when you are making that decision is that flexible spending accounts require an active session. The IRS requires employees to enroll every year in FSA. So if you do choose a passive session for your other benefits, it's best to configure a separate session for FSA only. But that does mean employees will have 2 sessions to choose from and 2 sessions that they could possibly need to enroll in. So if you do wish to include FSA in your main session, it will require an active enrollment for all of your employees. Open enrollment is passive by nature. So if an employee logs into a session that includes FSA and elects or declines FSA only, but makes no other elections or declines, then their current benefits will roll over to the new year. So part of the configuration, you can actually force employees to either enroll or decline. And that's a box that's labeled employee election is required. And that is on each deduction type in your session.
Thanks, Amy. I think we're good on questions. We don't have any at this moment, so we can roll into talking about your favorite, testing.
Testing is my favorite. It's actually a lot of fun. You find a lot of stuff when you're doing testing. So after you've configured your session, you can place it in test status, which is very, very, very important to keep an eye on. And you can test to experience making elections from your employee's point of view. So this will help you verify that your enrollment session is configured correctly, that all of your business rules that we covered are configured correctly, and that all pages include any necessary and helpful information that you wish for your employees to be able to view. I always recommend to test every session using a broad range of employees in each deduction group. You want to test every different combination of employee benefits that you can think of. Your testing team, they have to be administrators who have access to open enrollment prior to the session open date, so they can't be somebody with just an employee role. And they should have enough knowledge to be able to recognize if something is not correct. You may need to coach them a little bit in advance on what they can expect to see and what you would like them to report back to you. One of my clients, they have almost more than 10 sessions each year because they have a decentralized company that has component companies with varying pay frequencies and pay dates across their whole organization. So every year they have a team designated specifically for testing, basically one person for each session from each company or each combination of companies. And their team is administrators who are not involved in the configuration process. So they're kind of going in blind, but they know what to expect and what to look for. And in the past, they've caught incorrect rates on deduction plans and errors in the messaging to the employees. During your testing, you can hit submit, and I recommend going through the whole process and hitting submit. It'll change the status of the employee's enrollment to validated, which means that's a successful test. And once you reset your test elections, the status will change back to not started for your employee to be able to initiate the enrollment. A few things during testing that you definitely want to keep in mind is that some of the compliance updates may not be applied to the system yet. The FSA, going back to FSA, the annual limit for FSA, it will be applied by Ultimate, but obviously that can't be done until the IRS states the limit, and sometimes that doesn't come out until after testing or even after you go live for your employees. So you can absolutely configure, test, and go live with open enrollment prior to the updates being applied. Ultimate is very, very well aware of all compliance updates, and they will set the correct amounts once they get those. During testing, the one thing you do not want to do is add contacts. That's a live table even when the session is in test status. So if you add a contact to an employee record during testing, it will post to the employee's record in UltiPro. So what I recommend again is that you coach your testers to go through the process to add a contact, and that's something that you can either allow or not allow during your open enrollment. But let them know that they need to cancel and not save when they get to the final screen. Lastly, for testing, you want to be sure to reset your test selections when you're finished with your testing and ready to go live. If you don't reset, those tests can be posted to employee records, and when your employees log in, they will see any test elections that you have made on their behalf when they access their session. So be sure to reset your test selections.
Thanks, Amanda. We've got 2 or 3 questions that have come in, so I want to pause here. If the active enrollment and employees do not enroll, will their current benefits be termed automatically?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Sure. If they're doing an active enrollment and employees do not enroll, will their current benefits be termed automatically?
No, because open enrollment, I couldn't think of the word, because open enrollment is passive by nature. If your employees do not log in, do not do anything in open enrollment, everything except FSA will carry over to the new year.
Okay, great. And our next one, this person has asked, they have a payroll that runs biweekly, and usually deductions are calculated to withhold in 26 pay periods. And they would like to know how UltiPro will calculate, say if they have 27 pay periods next year, 1/1/21 being the pay date, their company will be moving the pay date from 1/1/21 to 12/31/20. So they're asking, does UltiPro calculate in 27 pay periods, or can they set up to deduct in 26 pay periods and have the last payroll be deduction free, except for their 401k and related things?
So deductions are set up to be withheld on payrolls based on, you can set it as first payroll of the month, second payroll, third payroll, that type of thing. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. So Laura, if you could get the person's contact information, if that's possible, and I can do a little bit of research and get back.
Sure. It came in anonymously, but whoever sent us this, if you will, I'll flag that question. And if you can shoot us your contact info privately, we will make sure we'll get you an answer. Next, we've got another one. Are there instructions or do's and don'ts for testers to follow?
I don't have anything specific, and I don't know that Ultimate does either. I can look for that, though. I just attended a webinar from Ultimate, so I'll see if they have any guides. But you might find something in the Learning Center. You might also have, there might be some recommendations in the checklist for you. But as far as anything like a Mosaic guide, I don't believe we have anything like that. Maybe we could check with our previous presenters and see if they've created anything for their teams. Laura?
Okay. So I'll flag those two, and we'll do a little research, and we'll get back to both of you. One more question. Can you set up an auto re-enroll from the previous year's selection for employees, and can you set up an auto waive if they don't elect?
As far as auto re-enroll, because it is passive, if they don't do anything, they will be re-enrolled except for FSA. An auto waive if they don't elect, I don't know of any system functionality that can handle that, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
There is a stop utility in UltiPro that your checklist will cover, but I don't know that you can do that specifically for a selection of employees. I think you have to do it by deduction type or by plan. I haven't done that in a while, but yeah, as far as an auto waive, I don't believe that we have that option.
Okay. And I had one question, which is a little bit more basic probably than some of our attendees who obviously know a lot more about this than I do, but what can happen overall if you don't test the sessions?
Yeah, a lot of things are uncovered during testing. I've seen plan contingency issues, like from my example earlier, an employee shouldn't be able to enroll in HSA if they haven't elected the corresponding qualifying high deductible medical plan. Incorrect deduction types or deduction plans. The one that comes to mind is I had a client who had a dental vendor change and they created a new plan, but by habit, the system admin used the old deduction plan in the session. So that was caught during testing by the administrators. Lots of errors in messaging. That's a big one. I definitely recommend your testers review messaging with a fine-tooth comb. I ask them to click on any links in the messaging if you have any. That way you know that they're taken to the correct website or the correct PDF documents, anything that you have embedded. Those are the three most common issues I can think of.
Okay, very good. If we don't have any more questions at this time, which it looks like we're doing well in that regard, let's go on and open it up for a general Q&A. And after Q&A, folks, don't be too quick to leave us because we'll have one more story from Amanda for you. So remember to ask a question. You can place it in the chat icon at the bottom of your screen, and we'll stand by for any additional questions you might have for Amanda. It's fairly quiet, Amanda, so I think you did a great job of answering them along the way. But as we are wrapping up, folks, if anything occurs to you, do ping me or put something in the chat box, and I will be happy to stop, and we can make sure Amanda gets to your question. So I'll turn it back over to you, Amanda, for your one more client story.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of end with, again, I stress the pending effective date estimator. I really, really think it's a great tool. It's a lot of people don't like the spreadsheet because it's kind of a secured file, but it's such a great tool, and I definitely recommend that everyone use it. I had a client similar to the one I described earlier that had multiple pay frequencies and multiple pay dates across their entire organization. They didn't want to set up separate open enrollment sessions, even though they got a lot of red cells on the pending effective date estimator. But because the dates didn't work for all of their pay groups in their one session that they configured, many employees had the current year's and the new year's benefits withheld on their first check of their new enrollment year. Anybody who had changed from one medical plan to another, unfortunately, had both come out of their check. So the client had to contact a lot of their vendors, and they had to do a lot of manual intervention to reimburse employees for the incorrect deductions. So just keep in mind, it is more work to configure multiple sessions, but it pays off when the employee's checks are correct, and the copy feature will be great to kind of eliminate some of that extra work too. A saying from our CEO that I refer to a lot is that in order for payroll to be acceptable, it has to be 100% correct. So that was brought up to me about a month ago, and I will always remember that now. So open enrollment always seems to have stress come hand in hand with it, but that can be eliminated if you work with the estimator, work with a toolkit and checklists, and of course, getting any advice from your Mosaic consultants. It doesn't have to be a scary time, which a lot of clients always think it is. So our experts here at Mosaic have a lot of experience with open enrollment, and for all of the scary stories, like I just mentioned, we have many more success stories and a lot of seamless open enrollment. So Just remember to test, 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 and know that we're always here to help.
Thank you, Amanda. We've had a couple more small questions, so I'm going to throw those your way.
Okay.
Do you know if there's wiggle room to adjust the pending effective date from what the spreadsheet calculates?
It'll give you a range of the date that you can use. As far as wiggle room outside of that, I would not recommend it. But I think it gives a 5 to 7 day date range that you can use for the pending effective date. So if you choose something outside of that range, it definitely can affect your employees' checks and your file feeds and that type of thing. So definitely stick with the minimum and the maximum that's recommended on the estimator.
Okay, great. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you again to all of you all for joining us today. Just as a reminder, we will send out a copy of this presentation to you along with our link to our blog on open enrollment that accompanies this webinar, which is already posted on our website for you to read. Please feel free to share all of these materials with others at your organization who might not have been able to join us today or who you think may be interested in learning more. And if you have questions, as always, please reach out to one of our Mosaic consultants. And thank you again for being with us today. Oops, before I close, we've got one more, Amanda. One of our attendees said they're currently using a prorate feature for medical, dental, and vision deductions. And the pending effective date addresses this. So they're wondering, what do you recommend?
The ultimate actually webinar that I attended last week, they recommend not to use the prorate feature, but if that's something that you have to use, I think it was Tammy, let me follow up with you on that, because I honestly don't think any of my clients have ever used it in my experience with open enrollment, but I can reach out to a couple other people on our team and see just exactly what that does impact. So Laura, do you want to take note of her name and email address, and I can follow up with her on that?
I sure will. We'll make sure to get you an answer. Again, thank you everyone so much. We really appreciate you joining us today and hope this was helpful to you. And watch for Ceci has already put the link to the blog and the presentation in the chat, but you'll also receive that from us later today. So thank you again, and we'll look forward to next time.